Good evening, good evening. It's whiskey and chat time again. So, the Freud, good stuff. Look, I'm even doing product placement. Happy New Year, everyone. Let's have a catch up on where we are, because I'm seeing lots of people chatting about Rejoin campaigning and who's leading the Rejoin campaign and when should it start? When's the right time? Is now the right time? In fact, Lord Heseltine was on the radio just today saying the Rejoin campaign starts now, and Andrew Adonis, true to Andrew's form, is already straight out of the traps on such a thing. So let's talk about all of that and how all of that goes from here. Now, do we want to rejoin? Of course. I mean, we believe in Europe. We believe in our countries working together through, structures where you have decisions together. But is that something that we want to be jumping into right now? Well, yeah, no. I mean, yes, because some people are going to be saying it already, and it's fine to hold a candle out for that and look at Scotland. We'll come on to that later. You know, they're already gunning hard for Rejoin again, straight out of the traps. But how it's going to work is more rebuild before you get into a position where you've got Rejoin. So think about Rejoin campaigning and rebuild campaigning. And there's just going to be a whole load of activity in the rebuild space, because there has to be, whether it's free movement or Erasmus Plus or on qualifications and financial passporting, or full EHIC, or even the policy forums that we need between the UK and the other European countries, whether it be in science or overall governance or what have you, right? We are going to need to rebuild in a lot of European space, and that sets the direction of travel. Yeah, sure, there are some people, the hardcore, neoliberal Brexiteers that want to go in an opposite direction of travel, but we've got to force the direction of travel back to rebuilding with Europe, and that only makes sense. And when you phrase it in terms of rebuilding, that really opens up a much broader catchment of who you can work with. So for those Brexiteers that have been, like Nigel Farage, crowing the war is over, well, it may be over for him, but it is certainly not over in spirit for so many of us, and it's not over pragmatically, because we have not left the European neighborhood and decamped our country onto Mars. We have affairs whereby we constantly need to be working with our neighbours, and it's constantly over advantage of us to work closer together. So, of course, all the battles around those issues are not going to go away. Anand Menon put it nicely and said, they may think it's over because they've won a set in the game of tennis, but the history of UK relations with Europe has gone very much set by set, and we're sort of at love all again in a new phase now. And I think that's a good way to conceptualize it. So the notion that Brexit and the European issue is somehow going to drop off the radar is kind of like no chance. I mean, no chance, because we have, the four following issues. Firstly, there are gaps in the deal. There are wide open gaps in the deal, such as I was saying before, lack of recognition of qualifications, that's to be decided. Data flows and data adequacy is to be decided. Financial passporting is to be decided. And then fishing is coming up for review. In fact, the whole thing is coming up for review again in 2026. So because there are so many gaps that need to be filled in over time, that's constantly going to be in the news, and that's constantly going to be discussed. Then you're going to have arguments over the actual fabric of the deal, because this treaty, that we have just signed, this deal, is less of a solid done foundation, to permanently build upon. It is more of a script as to how to manage the running battles that our government is going to have with the EU over time. In that, so much of it is about what happens if we diverge. And the whole purpose of Brexit, according to Brexiteers, was to diverge. So that again keeps throwing it back onto the radar. Then, of course, there is the real world impacts of Brexit. And people are feeling that already. I've just had a message from somebody who can't order from the Dutch company that he loves to order from, just because they don't serve to the UK now, because they just serve to, the single market. And so everyone's going to be finding those irritations, whether on a personal level or whether it's on business levels with exports and imports, or traveling to Europe, or trying to sell services into Europe. That's going to keep things on the radar. But most importantly, the big one coming up is Scotland. And that's going to, I've said in the Spanish accent, I do know not why, but that's going to be really, really interesting, because the SNP narrative for independence now is fully and thoroughly about Brexit. Every time Nicola Sturgeon is mentioning it, it's kind of, Brexit shafted us. Not a single constituency in Scotland voted for it, and yet we're having it shoved down our throats. And we didn't get a say in it, and we don't have any ability to modify it, and we're being dragged in a direction that we don't want to go. And interestingly, all of the conservative arguments, because I'm keeping a close eye on what the conservative think tanks are saying, that they're all saying, right, now that Brexit's done, the next mission is to save the union. And their main scripts for saving the union are all about economic responsibility and don't do economic damage. And they're starting to listen to the focus groups that are finding that the only real cut-throughs with the main demographics that they need to swing in order to preserve the union, and those demographics are people who voted no in 2014, voted Remain in 2016, and are now Indie curious or Indie yes. Those are the people that they have to get at. The Scottish Unionist Remainers who are now going for Scottish independence. And the argument that works with them is, this is, economically damaging. Don't make the same mistake that Brexit was in Scotland. Two wrongs don't make a right. That's the only messaging that cuts through. But for this government to employ that messaging of two wrongs don't make a right, has to start from the acknowledgement that Brexit is economically damaging, that it is regarded rightly by many people as being wrong. And if the government don't go with that, and they try rather to lecture upon economic responsibility, they will be lecturing against all of the sentiments that drove Brexit and they employed themselves. So that is going to be an absolutely fascinating debate in Scotland, because the more the SNP are now leaning heavily into echoes of all the Brexit arguments, and so the more that they go into that, the more difficult it is going to be for Tory Brexiteers to dig out of that and contradict their own behavioural patterns. So that's, but putting that aside, what I'm saying is that, is Brexit going to go off the radar? Not on your Nelly. This is going to be a massive, massive issue, because the whole issue about Scotland and the future of the union is going to be on Brexit with a betrayal narrative. And that's going to be fascinating to watch. And then also in terms of, rejoin campaigning or rebuild campaigning, it's important to note that all of the major campaigns that have developed over the past few years are still here. Scientists for EU were still here, so was March for Change, so was the European Movement, and Best for Britain, Grassroots for Europe, some of the Labour campaigns, the 3 million, and others, and so forth and so on. Have I gone out of focus here? Oi, camera. And we're veterans now. We have built up that capacity. I remember back in 2015 when the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign was put together, and it had no campaigning veterans and whatsoever. There was no structure on the ground. There was no local groups. There were no activists that had built up skills and built up communities in this area. We have all of that now, and we don't have deadlines now. I mean, what's happened over the last few years is there were always tight deadlines in Parliament. We were jumping from one reactive state to another, and then it got very close in 2019, and then it all got taken out of our hands by a general election. But now, I mean, if you look at Nigel Farage celebrating that he's gotten what he wants after 25 years of campaigning, we've been going at it for less than 5 years, and we now have the skills, the arguments. We're actually building up now from the ground based on all of those principles that kind of were taken for granted all along the way. It was never really covered in the media. It was never really argued for. And so that's actually what made our place in the European Union sort of quite hollow, because it wasn't fought for. But now this is something that we fight back for. And it might not even be that we go and join the EU, as it was, but things evolve. But the principle being that rebuilding our place within Europe and making sure that Britain is actually deeply involved with Europe and approaches Europe with a team spirit rather than this aggressive, hostile, naysaying, negative approach that many of the leading Brexiteers had. That's the thing that we rebuilt. And so that's what we're doing now. I mean, we still are in this country, incredibly, given that we've just Brexited, we've still got the most passionate pro-European community, probably in all of Europe, the most active, the most capable, and it's still, humming there as a machine. And now we've got time to rebuild it, bit by bit, brick by brick. We're all here, we're not going away. I'll be doing this possibly for the rest of my life, alongside, just championing science per se. And Rome wasn't built in a day. So get yourself some bollocks. Oh, what's going on there? Fascinating. Get yourself some bollocks to Brexit stickers. Get out there, have fun. And I think that was, hold a sec, that's because have I got, oh yeah, I selected a green screen thing for fun and then didn't actually use it. All right, get out of settings, and there we go. And so basically, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're all still here. We're going to be building it up. We're going to make a community of it. We're going to argue for all the things that we want to build in Europe. So get involved. And then once coronavirus is cleared out of the way, we'll also be able to have all of those physical meetups, all of those events that we did before, and that's going to be lovely, and that's going to be fun to see all of you again. So cheers to all of that. And again, like always, if you want to support us on Patreon, that would be dead helpful for providing that backbone of support all the way through the years coming. So just go to Patreon and then search up Scientists4EU and then throw something in to back us, and that will be magic. And I will catch you later.